I'm Di-Fanteria. This is The Art of War and ORSUS History, Fieldcraft. Part 2, Not Seen Nor Heard. Part 1, The Mark I Eyeball. I was initially going to break these short films down into the various categories of surveillance, counter-surveillance, observation, and so on. But once I had drafted the material, I realised that something Hugo de Besançon says in ORSUS encompasses almost everything I wanted to talk about in one simple sentence. Not seen nor heard, my young pupil. We know of it because Orsus records him using the phrase near Colossi Castle in Cyprus in late 1306. But before we get to Hugo, we need to go back rather further. Before camouflage had a name, before reconnaissance became doctrine, before surveillance involved cameras, electronics, or satellites, somebody had to find the enemy, preferably before the enemy found them. And that is really where the story of Fieldcraft begins. Not with camouflage cream, not with a sniper wearing a ghillie suit, not even with a soldier, but with the hunter. Long before organised armies existed, people learned to read the ground. Tracks, broken vegetation, disturbed earth, scent and smell, water, weather, wind direction. They learned how to approach something without frightening it, how to remain concealed, how to move quietly, and how to recognize when something else had passed before them. When people began fighting organized wars, those skills came with them. The quarry changed, but the principles did not. Armies needed people who could move ahead of everybody else, to find safe routes, identify obstacles, read the terrain, locate an enemy, and return with the information, ideally without the enemy ever knowing that they had been there. And scouts became some of the oldest specialists on the battlefield, and almost everything that followed depended upon one deceptively simple skill: observation. Before you can report something, you have to notice it, which is where Orsus first joins us. If you have read the novels, you may have noticed that Hugo Besançon does something remarkably often. He watches roads, windows, doorways, people, approaches, terrain. He watches before he moves, and sometimes he simply waits. And perhaps that isn't surprising. Hugo has had a very long time to learn the value of observation. Near Micy Abbey in 1307, two knights are on watch. One remains covering the main road, the other notices another approach through the trees. So he moves silently behind a hedge and chooses the trunk of a large oak tree. From there, he can see the courtyard and the previously unseen pathway. No optics, no electronics, no sophisticated surveillance equipment, just somebody asking perhaps the most fundamental fieldcraft question of all: where can I see them without them seeing me? "Do you hear or see anything?" said the dismounted knight to his comrade as they crouched behind an ornate hedgerow framing the courtyard entrance to Micy Abbey. They had been in position as instructed by Bernard de la Roche for 15 minutes or so, and had so far seen or heard nothing but the distant hoot of an owl. "No, brother, I think I will go to the opposite side. There seems to be a path that cuts through the trees over yonder." "Good. I will watch the main dead road. Stay safe, brother." Silently keeping behind the cover of the hedge, the knight made way to where a path did indeed bisect the thick tree line. This will do, he thought, and was soon concealed behind the trunk of a large oak, able to see into the courtyard whilst keeping vigil over the previously unseen pathway. And in that short passage we have already several of the fundamentals: observation, concealment, silent movement, the selection of a position, and the use of the ground. A fold in the landscape, a hedge, a ditch, a wall, a tree line, a building, a shadow. Ground can conceal you, but not all ground can protect you. Ground can channel somebody towards you or prevent you getting somewhere at all. And sometimes ground allows one person to observe another without being observed in return. But there is an important distinction. Concealment is not necessarily cover. Something that prevents somebody seeing you may provide absolutely no protection whatsoever if they start shooting at you. A hedge might hide you, but it probably won't stop a bullet. A substantial wall might do both. and knowing the difference matters. For centuries, much of Fieldcraft remained practical knowledge passed from one soldier to another. Avoid the skyline, use shadow, use the vegetation, move through dead ground, control your noise, control your light, remain still when perhaps somebody is looking towards you, move when their attention is elsewhere, and perhaps above everything else, never assume that because you cannot see the enemy cannot see you. And this is where our knight at Micy remembers something Hugo taught him the year previously at Colossi Castle. I'm deliberately going to leave part of that lesson for another film, because Hugo's understanding of seeing in the darkness takes us into the rather wonderful story of night vision, and improbably enough, William Shakespeare. For now, what matters is what happens after the young knight believes he has understood Hugo's lesson. He spots movement, a human shape perhaps. He concentrates on it, and then discovers that he has been concentrating on entirely the wrong person. Something in his peripheral vision caught the knight's attention. It was 10 or 20 yards further along the pathway, into the dense forest. A person-sized shape shifted slightly, just enough for him to make out a brief silhouette. He shifted his position silently to keep the form in view, and was suddenly gripped around the mouth by a strong hand in a chainmail glove. The point of a short but vicious dagger was at his throat. "Not seen nor heard, my young pupil," muttered the voice in his ear. His terror instantly subsided. "Hugo! Sergeant Hugo!" he quietly blurted out as he recognized the voice and the admonition. "An uncomplicated yet well-practiced deceptive move. You should remember it well," said Gerard de Villiers as he appeared beside the astounded young knight. An uncomplicated yet well-practiced deceptive move. I think that may be one of the better descriptions of Fieldcraft anywhere in ORSUS. It's not magic. It's not spectacular. It's uncomplicated, well practiced, because good Fieldcraft is really one astonishing trick. It is lots of very small things done properly. And as warfare developed, those small things became increasingly important. Scouts, skirmishers, light troops, trackers, riflemen, soldiers operating away from dense formations needed to make greater use of terrain, concealment, independent movement, and observation. And as weapons became increasingly effective at distance, being difficult to see became increasingly valuable. Natural materials had been used for concealment for centuries: vegetation, mud, cloth, whatever the environment provided. But gradually the battlefield began acquiring more eyes: optics, photography, balloons, aircraft, and eventually an extraordinary array of technologies designed to find somebody who very much does not want to be found. Which is where camouflage, reconnaissance, observation, and fieldcraft begin to become increasingly specialized. But strip away the uniforms, the terminology, and the technology, and our hunter would still recognize the problem. Find the quarry, read the ground, approach without being detected, watch, wait, and return with the information. See without being seen. At Micy Abbey, the tools were simple: a hedge, an oak tree, darkness, eyes, don't look directly at it, use your ears, be patient, experience. 7 centuries later, Hugo will have access to vehicles, radios, optics, computers, and surveillance technology. But something rather interesting happens. The principles don't disappear. Because once you have learned how to watch somebody, another question inevitably follows. What happens when somebody is watching you? And that is where we'll go next. The Watcher and the Watched. I'm Di-Fanteria. This is ORSUS, The Art of War. Fact, with fiction walking beside it. Dedicated to dreamers everywhere.